Welcome to another episode of the only show I know that you can watch me ride around on 92 cubic inches of American muscle through some of the most beautiful places on God's green earth. While we read the Bible together, this is Wrenchin' and Riding TV. We left off on Melchizedek yesterday and we're going into Ishmael today. Have you ever wondered if you were born into the wrong family? We don't know much about how Ishmael viewed life, but that question must have haunted him at times. His life, his name, and his position were bound up in a conflict between two jealous women. Sarah, impatient with God's timetable, had taken matters into her own hands, deciding to have a child through another woman, Hagar. Servant that she was, submitted to being used this way. But her pregnancy gave birth to strong feelings of superiority towards Sarah. Into this tense atmosphere, Ishmael was born. For 13 years, Abraham thought Ishmael's birth had fulfilled God's promise. He was surprised to hear God say that the promised child would be Abraham and Sarah's very own. Sarah's pregnancy and Isaac's birth must have had a devastating impact on Ishmael. Till then, he had been treated as a son and heir, but this late arrival made his future uncertain. During Isaac's weaning celebration, Sarah caught Ishmael teasing his half-brother. As a result, Hagar and Ishmael were permanently expelled from Abraham's family. Much of what happened throughout his life cannot be blamed on Ishmael. He was caught in a process much bigger than himself. However, his own actions showed that he had chosen to become part of the problem and not part of the solution. He chose to live under his circumstances rather than above them. The choice he made is one we must all make. There are circumstances over which we have no control, heredity, for instance, but there are others that we can control, decisions that we make, and the heart of the matter is the sin-oriented nature we have all inherited. It can be partially controlled, although not overcome by human effort in the context of history. Ishmael's life represents the mess we make when we don't try to change the things we could change. The God of the Bible has offered a solution. His answer is not control, but a changed life. To have a changed life, turn to God. Trust Him to forgive your sinful past, and begin to change your attitude towards Him and others. His strengths and accomplishments. One of the first to experience the physical sign of God's covenant, circumcision. Known for his ability as an archer and hunter. Fathered 12 sons who became leaders of warrior tribes. His weaknesses and mistakes. Failed to recognize the places of his half-brother Isaac and mocked him, the place of his half-brother. Lessons from his life. God's plans incorporate people's mistakes. His vital statistics. He was born in Canaan and Egypt. Occupation, hunter, archer, warrior. Relatives, his parents, Hagar and Abraham. Half-brother, Isaac. His key verse, God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying, as he lies there, lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Great oil-rich nation. All right, now we're going to go on to Abraham. We all know that there are consequences to any action we take. What we do can set into motion a series of events that may continue long after we are gone. Unfortunately, when we are making a decision, most of us think only of the immediate consequences. These are often misleading because they are short-lived. Abraham had a choice to make. His decision was between setting out with his family and belongings for parts unknown or staying right where he was. He had to decide between the security of what he had already had and the uncertainty of traveling under God's direction. All he had to go on was God's promise to guide and bless him. Abraham could hardly have been expected to visualize how much of the future was resting on his decision of whether to go or stay, but his obedience affected the history of the world. His decision to follow God set into motion the development of the nation that God would eventually use as his own when he visited earth himself. When Jesus Christ came to earth, God's promise was fulfilled. Through Abraham, the entire world was blessed. You probably don't know the long-term effects of most decisions you make. But shouldn't the fact that there will be long-term results cause you to think carefully and seek God's guidance as you make choices and take actions today? His strengths and accomplishments. His faith pleased God. He became the founder of the Jewish nation, was respected by others, and was courageous in defending his family at any cost. Was not only a caring father to his own family, but practiced hospitality to others. Was a successful and wealthy rancher. Usually avoided conflict, but when they were unavoidable, he allowed his opponent to set the rules for settling the dispute. His weakness and mistakes. Under direct pressure, he distorted the truth. Lessons from his life. God desires dependence, trust, and faith in him, not faith in our ability to please him. God's plan from the beginning has been to make himself known to all people. Vital statistics, where, born in Ur of the Chaldeans, spent most of his life in the land of Canaan. Occupation, wealthy livestock owner. Relatives, brothers Nahor, Haran, his father Terah, his wife Sarah, nephew Lot, sons Ishmael and Isaac. Contemporaries, Abimelech and Melchizedek. Abraham believed, his key verses, Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. Now, we're going to read about Sarah. There probably isn't anything harder to do than wait. Whether we are expecting something good, something bad, or unknown, one way we often cope with a long wait, or even a short one, is to begin helping God get his plan into action. Sarah tried this approach. She was too old to expect to have a child of her own, so she thought God must have something else in mind. From Sarah's limited point of view, this could only be to give Abraham a son through another woman, a common practice in her day. The plan seemed harmless enough. Abraham would sleep with Sarah's maidservant, who would then give birth to a child. Sarah would take the child as her own. The plan worked beautifully at first, but as you read about the events that followed, you will be struck by how often Sarah must have regretted the day she decided to push God's timetable ahead. Another way we cope with a long wait is to gradually conclude that what we're waiting for is never going to happen. Sarah waited 90 years for a baby. When God told her she would finally have one of her own, she laughed. Not so much for a lack of faith in what God could do, but from doubt about what he could do through her. When confronted about her laughter, she lied. as she had seen her husband do from time to time. She probably didn't want her true feeling to be known. What parts of your life seem to be on hold right now? Do you understand that this may be part of God's plan for you? The Bible has more than enough clear direction to keep us busy while we're waiting for some particular part of life to move ahead. Her strengths and accomplishments: was intensely loyal to her own child, became the mother of a nation and an ancestor of Jesus, was a woman of faith, the first woman listed in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11. Her weaknesses and mistakes: had trouble believing God's promise to her, attempted to work problems out on her own without consulting God, tried to cover her faults by blaming others. Lessons from her life: God responds to faith even in the midst of failure. God is not bound by what usually happens. He can stretch the limits and cause unheard of events to occur. Vital statistics: where married Abraham in Ur of the Chaldeans, then moved with him to Canaan. Occupation: wife, mother, household manager. Her relatives: her father Terah, husband Abraham, half-brothers Noah and Haran, nephew Lot, son Isaac. By faith, Abraham even thought, By faith, Abraham even thought he was past age, and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful whom he had made the promise. So, that's a good lesson, that we don't always get everything that we want, and we don't always get everything that we want in our time. But God's time is perfect, and sometimes you just got to kick back and pray about it and wait for God's time. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do works, because faith without works is weak sauce, but God will do his thing in his time, and we have to respect that. And hit the subscribe button if you want, click the bell if you want updates, and thanks for tuning in. Have a blessed day.